Not all of our rooms here have AC, so I had to find the one room that has AC to do this call in, so I wasn't dripping the whole time.
I definitely understand that. I live in Texas, so every room has AC,
Yeah.
Otherwise I would die, but I get it. Okay, well, it is 8 Eastern, 7 Central, so I'm going to go ahead and get this started because your time is precious and we so appreciate you joining us this evening. So tonight I have the pleasure of speaking with debut author Nikki Erlick for her instant New York Times bestseller, The Measure, which was also the Today Show's Read with Jenna pick and the Barnes & Noble Discover pick. Enchanting and deeply uplifting, The Measure is a sweeping, ambitious, invigorating story about family, friendship, hope, and destiny that encourages us to live life to the fullest. And by way of a brief introduction for Nikki, she is a writer and editor whose work has appeared online with New York Magazine, Newsweek, Cosmopolitan, Harper's Bazaar, The Huffington Post, and many others. As a travel writer, she explored nearly a dozen countries on assignment, from rural villages in France to the Arctic fjords of Norway. As a ghostwriter, she's written for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and academics. She graduated Harvard University, summa cum laude, and was an editor of the Harvard Crimson. She earned her master's degree in global thought from Columbia University. So welcome, Nikki. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I have it on gallery view right now, so I'm seeing everyone. So it's a really great group here. So I really appreciate you all coming out tonight to watch, coming out virtually.
Yeah. A few other quick thank yous before I dive in. A special thanks to Jennifer Crowley, the group's founder, for everything that she does behind the scenes to make these chats possible. A thank you to all of the moms who've already read The Measure, who've raved about it in the group, told your friends outside of the group about it. And to the moms who joined us live, we appreciate it. And to the moms who are going to join us later because life happens and catch this recording over on our YouTube channel, we really appreciate you coming as well, and welcome. So thank you. All right, so let's dive in. The first, the obligatory question. For those who haven't read The Measure, give us just a brief synopsis in your own words, what the story is about.
Sure. So The Measure opens on what seems like an ordinary morning, but actually overnight, billions of mysterious boxes have appeared all around the world for every adult waiting outside everyone's doorstep. And everyone's box looks the same, except it has your name on it. And all the boxes have the same mysterious inscription: the measure of your life lies within. And then we soon find out that within each box is a single piece of string. And of course, chaos ensues, confusion, but the fact that the boxes arrived all over the world means that very quickly everyone can kind of collaborate and figure out that the measure of the length of string inside your box actually does correlate with the kind of full length of your life. And so all of a sudden everyone's faced with the same choice of, do I want to open this box, measure the string, and learn the answer? And the book follows 8 kind of intertwined characters as they grapple with this decision and sort of how it affects them and how it affects kind of their whole society.
Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. That is perfect description of what this book is about. I loved it. So I'm really curious as to find out a little bit more about the inspiration behind the story. Where did you dream up this idea? And
yeah, I know it's amazing if an author can say that the idea actually came to them in a dream. That would be quite special when that happens. But this one really came from a lot of kind of thinking, a lot of my own sort of struggling actually with life being so unpredictable, wondering kind of how much control we actually have, especially during times like these last couple of years where it's felt like really a lot is happening outside of our control. Really wondering how much power do I have as an individual over kind of my destiny. And I'm someone who really looks to books and to stories to kind of help me make sense of the world. And so I wanted to see if maybe I could write my own story about sort of these bigger questions, and was thinking about what would a story about fate kind of look like. And then one day remembered the ancient Greek mythology around fate and their belief in these 3 sisters, sister goddesses, the 3 fates, who would weave these threads of life on their spindle. And they were in charge of kind of measuring the amount of time that each mortal down below would receive. And I just had this kind of moment, like, what if these strings were real? And what if we could see them? How would that affect the whole world? Mostly how would that affect kind of a handful of individuals? And sort of, could I tell that story?
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. A lot of our, Jen said, I think this book should become part of high school curriculum. Wouldn't that be neat?
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
A lot of our members were curious as to whether this was some sort of an allegory to the COVID experience that we've all collectively shared recently. You touched on a lot of current issues between the mandates, the political division, the class distinctions, the marginalized people in general. So how did history and or the pandemic play into your writing process and or editing process, depending on when you wrote this book?
Yeah, absolutely. It was started before the pandemic. It was sort of, the premise came before the pandemic, the characters did as well. And then really just this kind of crazy sort of twist of fate, for lack of a better term, that the book ended up kind of being sort of mostly written then in quarantine. So I already had the idea, and actually from the very beginning, I had these boxes arriving in March. That was, I know a lot of people sort of see that and of course, immediately think of the sort of alignment with the pandemic. That is just a very strange, unintentional coincidence that I had already picked March, and then March ended up being kind of the beginning of the pandemic. And I wanted to leave that in there because I do appreciate that it can be kind of read as an allegory for this time. And really, I got laid off from my job in March of 2020, along with many other people in a similar situation. And so I kind of found myself with this book was the only thing I had. And then I was writing it during quarantine and saw that obviously what was happening in the world was quite similar to what I was writing in this book. And I think that this book was always going to be about how we value our lives and how we value other people's lives and sort of how we treat other people and how we want to spend our time. But those questions just became so much more like urgent and relevant for everybody during this moment, and for me as well. And has really allowed the book to resonate in a way that I never could have anticipated when I started writing in 2019. But in terms of kind of the, as you mentioned, sort of allegory, I didn't want to write the short stringers as an allegory for any kind of particular like group of people or a specific parallel to some marginalized community, but I did want it to feel very authentic and realistic, and so tried to kind of draw upon the experiences of many different historically marginalized groups. Sort of spoiler alert, the kind of treatment of the short stringers, not being able to serve openly in the military draws upon history of the LGBTQ plus community within the U.S. military. Kind of the profiling of short stringers as potentially being dangerous was, drawing upon the profiling of Muslim Americans among other communities. So I did kind of pull from different aspects of history in that sense, and wanted the sort of experience to feel like it was something that felt very real, very kind of grounded in our world. And unfortunately, the book is coming out in a moment when it feels even more relevant. There's even, more hate crimes, more kind of division of people into this us versus them sort of mentality. So it's kind of a sad reality, but it is one that I wanted to really explore in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have 8 different characters, and the way that you wove it all together, I'm kind of curious as to your writing process. Did you always envision them weaving together the way that they did, or, tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
I actually thought it would be many fewer characters in the beginning. I thought it would first just be a love story between a person with a long string and a person with a short string. But then kind of the more time that I lived in this world, I just couldn't stop thinking about other potential characters. And, all of a sudden was thinking how would a doctor kind of react to this conundrum when they're, dealing with life and death kind of more intimately than the average person? And how might a soldier respond if they're sort of knowingly entering a dangerous career? And how might a politician kind of use this moment, sort of in a broader kind of socio-political way? And so I couldn't stop kind of thinking of these other potential people. And so I had to kind of start creating them, and the cast just kept growing and growing. And once I hit 8, I was like, I got to cut myself off. This is the maximum amount. No one is going to read more than this. And then I think really because I was writing in quarantine and in kind of this time of loneliness and isolation, I wanted all the characters to intertwine, almost just as a way of sort of comforting sort of myself and other people that, even when we're all isolated, all lonely, we are all still connected as humans. And there are ways that our lives kind of overlap, even if we don't see it happening. That was something that was just important to me. It's something that I kind of take great comfort in, this feeling that we're all somehow connected. And as you mentioned, kind of the writing process, I had to really write like very separately, so that I personally didn't get confused. So like I would really only write in kind of the perspective of one character per day. And that was how I approached it. Like today, I'm just going to write sort of Nina's scenes and, keep it clear like that. But of course was, trying to find ways for them to intertwine all along.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That is another one of the questions that we like to ask authors. Do you write, just linearly the story from start to finish,
Right.
or do you just do scenes, or do you do characters? And with as many characters you had, that made sense. It's so funny. Last night we had a post about this book kind of blow up in the group, and someone had to like chart out all of the characters and write her notes, to keep everything straight in her head while she was reading it. And so I'm curious as to when you were writing this and developing the story, how did you decide which characters would have long strings and which characters would have short strings, and which characters would want to know and wouldn't want to know? Did it happen organically? Like, did you put a lot of thought into it?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because people ask like, what was the thought process for that? And I kind of realized there almost wasn't one, like that the characters just kind of popped into my head with their string attached, almost in the way that I've heard other authors say that they don't choose their characters' names. Their characters just come with their name kind of already like a part of them. And so to me, it was like the string was kind of already a part of the character when they popped into my head, and I didn't really have to, I didn't go back and kind of change anything. Actually, everyone I think stuck with their original kind of string length. But I knew that I wanted obviously a mix of different sort of decision-making processes in terms of, would you open or not open? And honestly, a lot of those were just my thought process on any given day. Like one day I was like, I really understand why I would open it, and here's why. And that became one character. And another day I was like, oh my goodness, no. And then that became someone else's character. And it was really kind of me putting little aspects of, my own kind of working through this question in the different ways.
I remember when I was reading the book and my husband was like, well, what are you reading? And I was explaining the premise to him. And I was like, and this chick opened her box, and then she just was like, I need to go see what my boyfriend's string looks like. So that was an interesting concept in my day job as a lawyer. So it got me to thinking about, privacy and rights of privacy. So that was another interesting question, separate and apart from would you personally look at your own string, then it becomes about who has a right to know what your string length is and what does that mean in the grand scale. So let's just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard a lot of people reacting saying, I don't want to open my own box, but I want to open my like family members' boxes. Like I don't want to know my own string, but I want to know my partner's string, my loved one's strings, which is, I think maybe one of the most common reactions actually, that you kind of don't want to know for yourself, but there's something about you that wants to know about for the people around you. And I think that's probably one of the greatest struggles for the characters in the book, and would be kind of the greatest struggle for myself. And, I was, as I was writing, I was like, are there people out there who would go behind people's backs and open their boxes? Because it seems like such a betrayal. Like, could anyone actually do that? And then I was like, I think there probably would be some people who would do that. And so we might have to write that into the story.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that there would be people out there that would do that. Well, I personally rated this book 5 stars. I loved it. And in my review, I did note that, this is not a story that's going to give you all of the answers. You're not going to know where this box came from, why, the origin story of that. It focuses on the characters and their journey with this knowledge. So what was your thought process behind not giving all of those answers, not explaining the box origin and the randomness behind who got long strings versus short strings?
Yeah, I think it was definitely something I thought about a lot. I think part of it is that I'm not really a sci-fi writer, even though that this book is maybe classified a little bit like science fiction. And so I was kind of less interested in sort of creating my own mythology and my own sort of, idea of where these boxes came from and who created them, and more really focused on sort of the humanity, as you said, really telling the human side of the story. And I also think as I sat with it more, I was just thinking that, there are a lot of things in life that we don't get the answers to, things that aren't quite as fantastical as boxes appearing out of nowhere. But, we don't really know why life is so random. we don't know why some things happen the way they do. Why life doesn't treat everyone fairly, why bad things happen to good people. I think these are things that we all struggle with. Certainly I do. And part of life is accepting that we don't get to know those answers, and accepting that there are things that are just out of our control. And whether you believe that in a more religious sense or just a more kind of secular sense. And so I think I wanted the characters to kind of have to live with that uncertainty too, and accept that this is a mystery of the universe that they won't get the answer to. And it's up to them really to just decide how they continue living on, even in the face of that uncertainty, which is kind of something that we as humans have to do every day as well.
Well said. Good point. I think it works really well in the speculative fiction genre, that you don't have to answer all those questions. It's the fantastical element, and then you can start to just run with that and go. And so.
Yeah, I think I knew too, though, that because I was going to withhold some sense of closure in terms of, where the boxes came from. And so then I knew then I had to give a pretty good amount of closure for the characters themselves. And so that's why I decided to kind of end with this, many years later. So we do feel like there's a sense of closure for the characters, even if not for kind of this greater, mystery for the world.
I'm going to get to the ending. You got me good there. Did not see a portion of that coming, but I really loved it. So was there a particular reason behind the age being 22 when folks started to receive their string? I was like, okay, well, the book's being published in 2022. I don't know. What was the
so interesting? Yeah, I think I wanted it to be a decision that you could make for yourself. And so I felt like it couldn't come for children in the sense that then it would be parents making a decision on behalf of their children and not kind of that individual themselves making the choice. And I wanted it to be this like new kind of cusp of adulthood, this sort of new marker of like what it means to be an adult, and that hopefully it's a time when you're kind of mature enough to sort of think through all the consequences, but still young enough that sort of if you choose to open your box, you hopefully have enough time ahead of you to let that choice really inform the type of life you want to live. And I think, of course, I was initially thinking like 18 or 21, these kind of like milestone ages that we have in our culture. But then realized that these strings are, a global phenomenon, and 18 and 21 are very important years here in America, but not necessarily in like the rest of the world. And so I didn't want it to kind of feel like it was sort of trapped in my like American viewpoint. And then kind of 22 is the number that then came to me as this sort of new cusp of sort of being a grown up and making that choice.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, good to know. It's just my personal preference that when you're going to write a novel that asks an existential question or addresses these big, timely issues, I enjoy a story that is told from both a macro perspective and a micro perspective. And in the measure, we got to see how the strings affected these particular characters, but then also there was the commentary on the things that were play at the world at large. How did you go about finding the balance of what to focus on and when you were writing the book?
Yeah, I think I always knew that I wanted to be mostly sort of through the lens of these characters, and that it was like taking kind of a very extraordinary situation and sort of looking through the lens of ordinary folks. And I wanted, of course, then to have, enough sense of different perspectives, because this is something that, every box would lead to a different reaction for every different individual. There are, billions of potential responses and interpretations of this event, because every different type of human has a different response. And so I wanted to have enough kind of in there, but knew that, I would never be able to capture the full range of kind of human responses. And so then decided to kind of gesture towards like what's happening in other countries, in the sense that I feel like, so I'm from America, that's kind of I know this culture the best. So I wanted to sort of explore mostly what was happening here in America, but then did want moments where you hear what's happening in other countries, and kind of getting this sense that the way we do things here is not necessarily the way that things are done in other countries. We have, a unique culture here, and I personally believe we would respond in this way, although, maybe I got it wrong. And that other countries, might take a totally different direction to these strings. And that's kind of the sort of the beauty and sort of the diversity in the world.
Yeah, I love how you just incorporated it all. I think that it helped to really develop the story and give it this grander scale than just focused on the US and these little 8 characters. So Before the discussion, we asked some of our members if they had anything that they'd like to see addressed in tonight's chat. So I'm going to pop over and ask a few of these questions from some of our members. Lainey wanted to see if you'd elaborate on your thoughts. Did a patient receive less care because her string was short, or was a patient's string short because she received less care?
It broke my brain as well. But it was something that, as I was writing, like that conundrum hit me, and I knew that the characters would struggle with it because it was something that I was struggling with. I have to, as I was deciding sort of these strings, I felt like they had to be kind of all knowing, all powerful. And so it's like the string is able to know your response to the string, if that makes sense, that like sort of the ending of the string takes into account kind of everything that would happen if you open or didn't open your box. And so in my sense, it's like the string is sort of all powerful, all knowing in that sense. But it was something that I sat with a lot and kind of was mind bending for me. And so I knew that it would have to kind of be in there in the characters' sort of broken brains as well.
Right. I mean, you did have some of those people who saw their string and they're like, well, I'm going to go jump off this building because I know it's going to be okay. But then, you're going to live, but you're going to be in a fair amount of pain if you go do these things. So I feel like this is going to be a question that you probably get in all of your interviews. But Liz asked, would you open the box?
I think I would try not to. I'm very much like a planner in my life, so I'd be incredibly tempted to do so, but I'd really try not to, and maybe like check in with myself every year and see if I change my mind. I would not throw it away or sort of, destroy it the way other people try to. I would keep it in case I changed my mind. But it was really interesting. I did a different Zoom and they kind of polled people and said at the very beginning of the book, before you started reading it, would you have opened your box? And I think 2/3 of the people said yes. And then they said, when you finished reading the book, would you open your box? And it switched and 2/3 of the people said no. And so it's quite fascinating that happened. I don't know what explains it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very personal question. So it's interesting to get your take on it. I mean, I like to think that my answer would be no most of the time. My only hesitation is like, I'm a parent and maybe I would like to know how much time I have left with my kids and like just
to make preparations, of course. Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
of course.
Mm-hmm. Sarah wanted to know, was there a particular reason for the string being blue? Was the string blue? I think it was.
I was like, the string is blue in the video that the Today Show made. And I think, so I've been getting this after that video came out. I think that they just did that to like make it sort of pop in the box. In my mind, the string is like a neutral, like silvery kind of color, like silvery beige. But no, I know everyone now is saying the string is blue because of that Today Show video, which is very fun.
It was a fun video. I love it when books get video treatment. I think it adds a little extra something special. So
it's like a movie trailer, which is so crazy.
Laura said she loves when books are mentioned within a book, and she wanted to know, why did you choose to reference or mention atonement? Was there?
Yeah, I was like, I also love when books are referenced in books. And so I threw in, I think, a fair amount in here. I tried to really throw in the books that have had some sort of special impact on me. So I know that I think the two that sort of Amy's referencing with regards to her students are The Giver and Tuck Everlasting, which were like two of my favorite books growing up and really influenced me a lot. And then Atonement was the specific, I haven't actually told this in any interview, it's so interesting. Atonement was the last book that I was reading when I decided that I was going to sit down and write a book myself. I was just like I was in jury duty, not being called. It was like many, many hours, and I was reading Atonement and just was like floored by this book, especially by the ending. And I was like, this is my dream. Like, what am I waiting for? I want to do this. And it was really that night that I like started writing things out on legal paper and writing notes down. And I think there's a little bit of maybe a parallel between sort of the ending that you don't see coming in Atonement and maybe the ending that you don't see coming in this book, but it wasn't that wasn't sort of purposely done. It was like, truly, that was the book that I was like, I love this book. I love writing. This is my dream. Like, I'm going to do this. So that was my homage to Atonement.
Well, great question there, Laura.
Yes,
Thank you for
great
answering
question.
that. I love that book too. I love that movie. Keira Knightley in that green dress will just
Great
always be
movie.
iconic to me. So, and we had a few people chime in on our chat function this evening, so I'm going to try to hop over and get some of those. Laura had asked if you have you had people trying to punch holes in the book's logistics? My mind immediately went to how this would affect insurance coverage, finding missing persons as their box would show up where they lived, things like that.
Interesting. No one has been trying to no one has like sent me any sort of question saying, can you, explain all of these things? I think if you know the premise going to the book, I think people understand they have to like suspend a little bit of sort of disbelief when they're going into the story. And I also think it helps that a lot of people read the book, as you mentioned earlier, kind of almost purely as an allegory, and that it's like less about what these boxes are and more about kind of what they represent and what they could sort of stand for in our world. And so they perhaps don't care as much about what the boxes are as just more about kind of how we respond to them. But yeah, no, luckily no one has gotten too much into it. I try to like address some things like the insurance questions, sort of some like legal questions, because they were obviously coming up for me as well. But I didn't really want to get bogged down in too many of those details. I was more interested in kind of in the characters.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a favorite character to write, or was one harder than the others?
I don't know if I had a favorite actually. I have kind of a special fondness for Nina and Amy as sisters, just because I have a sister, and that relationship is kind of modeled off of our relationship. And I think I have a favorite little element of the story, I'll say, which I put in the very beginning of the manuscript, and I was like, please, 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 to my editor, don't cut this. Like I have a special fondness for this, which is the story of the prayer card from Jack's grandfather that gets handed down to Javier then at the end, because that is a true story from my own grandfather and his time in World War II, and a story that he's just told since I was a child, and something that's always really stuck with me. And so when I put it in the book, I was like, please don't take this out. This is the one like darling that I can't kill,
Mm-hmm. I loved the prayer card and the way that it was passed on to different people, and hearing that was a true story, that just makes it even more special. I'm so glad that we got to hear that from you this evening.
True story.
Yeah, so let's talk about this eye-catching cover. How involved were you in the design, and does this final version closely mirror, the original version? And noticeably absent, there is no box on this cover. So there's a lot to even talk about with this cover.
All good questions. I wish I could take more credit. I wish I could be like, yeah, I designed the cover, because it is so stunning. But no, I did not. I was very happy to like give full reign to, the HarperCollins designers. I'm not a visual artist in any sense. And we did have early on a lot of discussions about, how literal should the cover be? Definitely discussions about should there be a box on a doorstep, a string in a box, and decided that we wanted the cover to feel a little bit more kind of symbolic and a little bit more evocative of sort of the emotional themes of the book as opposed to the plot elements. Because I think some people do like kind of going into the book sort of blind to the plot actually, which is interesting. And so then this design was quite similar to what it is now. It was just a different color scheme the first time I saw it. And I just like loved the bouquet. I loved the fact that it was, emotional and symbolic and kind of abstract, but that there is the string, tying everything together at the end as sort of the nod to the book. I really thought was beautiful. And it was in a different color scheme at first. And we were like, we love this design, but I think maybe the colors need to change. And then when they came back with the gold, we all just knew like, this is it. It was just so eye-catching. And, to me is kind of like almost like a sunrise or a new dawn, like has this very hopeful feeling to it, the gold. And I just, loved it as soon as I saw it. But if you do want a version with a box on the cover, I have seen the German translation of the book, and they actually have a box sitting on a doorstep and the door kind of like slightly ajar as if someone's about to open it and like see the box. It's very kind of mysterious and ominous, and it's very cool. So other countries could be kind of going in totally different directions.
And the title, was it always The Measure, or how do we settle on that?
was always the measure was really the like title that I put on my Word doc at the very beginning. And I was like, this is tentative. I'll just write like the measure and, figure it out later. But I kind of never went back to see if I wanted to change it. And then the publisher, like, no, it was never, ever mentioned, like the title. I think everyone just really liked the fact that it could be, the measure of the string, as well as kind of broader, like the measure of a man, the measure of a life, the measure of a society. I like that it sort of alluded to all those different things. And yeah, at some point down the line when we were like about to publish, I was like, should we have talked about the title? But I was like, I guess we're all on board.
I feel like it's rare that no one ever has like a discussion about the title. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think I remember Googling, like, are there any other books with this title? And there weren't. There were several, like the measure of something, but there nothing else seemed to come up with this. So I was like, maybe that's a sign too, that we should leave it.
Definitely. Faye said, can you talk about your experience with your book being selected as the Read with Jenna selection?
Oh my gosh, like life-changing. I mean, truly, just we'll always remember that phone call from my editor and my agent, and they were like, are you sitting down? Because we've got some news. And I mean, Jenna is just an amazing champion for books. I think all of her books this year, like up to mine, were debuts, which is amazing that she's, sort of lifting up these kind of unknown authors. And I had grown up watching the Today Show too. So it was like very special that this was something like I watched with like my mom and sister growing up. And they were so nice when I went and did the interview. Like Hoda and Jenna both gave me a huge hug when I arrived, and were just so sweet and so welcoming. I'm so grateful for that experience, truly.
I love to hear that they're so personable and that they seem as genuine as they come across. So that's great.
Absolutely. I think they could tell that I was extremely nervous. So they're probably like, this girl needs a hug. She needs someone to calm her down.
Janine had said she loved the interconnectedness of the characters and how some who had never met influenced others, such as the hospital patient and the grandfather's prayer card. Were there other little Easter eggs like that in the book that weren't as obvious and might have been missed?
I think everyone really gets them. It's like, I think the only ones that sometimes people have mentioned to me is not getting is that, yes, that the hospital patient ultimately is the one who receives the organ donation from Hank, and that that the prayer card was connected to the soldier who wrote, Amy and Ben's letter. I think maybe that if you're like not paying as much attention, that could go sort of slip past. But I wanted people to, I didn't want to like hide anything. I'm not as sophisticated as like the Marvel movies, hiding all their Easter eggs. It's like I wanted people to feel the sense of interconnection, and sort of, I didn't want it to be too subtle that it would kind of not get noticed.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm glad that we picked up on all of the major things. So what do you hope that readers take away from the measure ultimately?
I hope that, like I've heard a lot of people kind of describe the book saying that it, makes you want to live life to the fullest, or kind of make the most of your time. And those are really beautiful expressions. I'm very happy that, people are associating that with my book. But I also want people to feel like kind of living life to the fullest means something different to every person. And that, it means something different to each character in this book. For some of them, it means, giving your life in sort of service of helping others, throwing yourself into your profession that gives you fulfillment, finding love, starting a family. These are all different kind of potential paths for meaning and purpose for all of us. And so I want the book to, show that sort of we can all find that fulfillment and happiness, even if it looks different for each person. And certainly that, despite all of our differences, and despite really the amount of time that we each have on earth, there is equal value in every life. There's equal kind of impact of every person. And, hopefully we treat everyone with empathy and respect and compassion, kind of knowing that we are all, equal and connected as humans.
Yeah, that's a good sentiment. I like to think that readers are some of the most empathetic people out there, because we read all of these different stories and hear about other people's experiences. I hope that means that we can appreciate them more and be more tolerant in our everyday lives. So
yeah, I think they've done studies for like that children who read more are like more empathetic towards people who are different from them. I mean, that's amazing. Like the fact that that can, that reading can have that impact on people is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. My son is going into first grade. And so over the summer, I've had him read 2 books to me every day. And he's like, why do I have to do this?
Oh.
It's summer. And I'm like, because reading is awesome. Get on board.
You're a good mom. That is very good.
Despite this novel having just been published, I believe that either TV or film rights have already been optioned or purchased. Is there anything that you can tell us about that? I'm sure it's early in the process.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I know. I thought it takes a long time to write and publish a book, and it takes a very long time to potentially make a TV show. But the TV rights have been acquired, which is, again, like beyond my wildest dreams. And an amazing production company. It was the film and TV company founded by President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. So it's quite incredible company to be in. I'm very grateful they connected with the story, and we'll see what happens. As you said, it is early, but the fact that anyone wanted to kind of option it is quite unbelievable.
Well, I like to think that it's in good hands with that particular production company. So.
Yes, I think so.
So if you were sitting down to help create the reader's guide to the measure, besides the obligatory, would you open your box? What is a question that you would include for book clubs to discuss and think about?
Yeah, I think a question that I like asking book clubs, because I don't really know the answer myself, is, are the boxes a gift or a curse?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we'll have to discuss that in the book club after tonight's chat. That's a good one.
And it could vary to, like, I think in my head, I think it, is it a gift or a curse to humanity? And then is it a gift or a curse kind of to each individual person? They could be 2 different questions, but that's one that someone posed to me, and I was like, that's a tough one. I'm a little sort of speechless on that one.
Good to know. Did you want to help write the script or hand it over and just see whatever somebody else interprets your work?
I think I'd like to see how someone else interprets it. I would like to be involved, and the producers have said I could be involved, which is really wonderful. But yeah, I think, TV it's such a different medium. It's a very different type of writing. And so I think it could be, interesting to see what someone who's an expert in that field does, and kind of expands the story even more. I think the fact that with a TV show, it could maybe there could be parts taking place in other countries. There could be, just like a much sort of more global point of view that I wasn't necessarily able to kind of give myself. And I think that could be really exciting.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed that it actually comes to fruition.
Yes.
Well, I know that, the measure just came out, but are you working on anything currently? Or are you just letting some ideas simmer, or where are you at with something?
Yeah, I was brainstorming a bunch of different ideas, maybe in like April, May, and then since the book came out, it's just been chaos, and I have not had a chance to go back to that document. But I do have a couple of different ideas that I'm kind of working towards. Something that I liked from this book, as a lot of people have sort of talked about, is like the intertwining ensemble. I think I'd like to kind of see if I could sort of bring that to another book as well. But yeah, I'm not even sure. This book just kind of came out of nowhere in my head. It wasn't like I said, I want to write, a speculative fiction. What can I do? It was just like this idea just kind of popped in. And so I'm waiting for the same kind of an idea to pop in that I just can't stop like thinking about and writing about.
Okay, fair enough. It seems that the organic way worked this time around. So don't force it, let it come to you, and we'll patiently wait.
Yeah, I would love to all of us convene again and like give me a couple of years, and then we'll be back.
Definitely, we will be in touch. Are you doing any in-person events, and is there a calendar or some dates that we can find for those?
Yeah, my website has whatever's most up to date, just nikkierlick.com. I did a couple in New York and LA, which is kind of where my home base is. And then I'll be at this authors festival at the end of the month in Sonoma, California, which will be exciting. And hopefully like others kind of that keep popping up as it goes on. But and just, things like this, which are amazing, which allow, people from all over to come together, I think is really, really special.
Yeah, I mean, we've loved having the Zoom chats because, we are primarily a group full of moms who do not have the time to just pop over and spend an evening at a Barnes and Noble. And so these Zooms are really special to us. So we really appreciate you coming and spending the evening with us. To wrap up our discussion, we always like to ask our guests, what are you currently reading, loving, recommending? Let us know. We'd be happy to share those with the group.
Yeah, I had gotten a sort of early copy of Mika in Real Life, which was Amiko Jean's new book. I think it's the GMA book club pick this month. I got an early read, so I felt very special. And I really loved that. It's like a great summer read, very sort of warm and funny and fun. And next on my list is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. It came out earlier this year. And he was actually like one of the kind of supportive early authors. Because I didn't do an MFA, I don't really like have as much of an author community as I would like. And so he was one of the earliest people who reached out to me, was like, I know you have a book coming out in a few months, and like, happy, like great to meet you, happy to support. And that really meant a lot to me. So I'm excited for his book. It's gotten great reviews.
Fantastic. I have read that one. And
you have? Okay.
Yeah, it was good. Some of the sections were tough to read.
I've heard it's,
but I mean, it's a good book club book. I mean, if you can, dive in and appreciate what's going on. So, well, I hope that you enjoy it when you get the opportunity. And thank you so much, Nikki, for spending your night with the Peloton Moms Book Club. We wish you so much continued success with the measure, and we will continue to share our love with it in and outside of the group.
Thank you so much for having me, really, and for everyone who came. It really means a lot. I'm very, very grateful for it.
All right. Well, have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.